Thank you for choosing the Minority Alliance Organization meeting today. Today we'll be discussing current events going on around the country, kind of finishing off with the George Floyd case here soon, and we'll be seeing a verdict. There was an incident that occurred actually in Minnesota about a week ago that we kind of want to discuss. And then also on Monday night, there was a situation in North Carolina that we kind of want to breeze on. Mark, when it comes to what occurred in Minnesota with Dante Wright and having the officer, now it's said that she mistaked her taser for her sidearm. She mistaked her sidearm for her taser. How does that kind of fit, for you? And do you think that, second degree manslaughter is the correct, penalty that should have been given on that end?
So it definitely is not the correct charge, but I can tell you that I have a complete understanding as to how they got to that charge. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. This is a person who was on the police force for 26 years. This person started in the year, what is that, 1995 as a police officer. So this person's been around for a really long time. This person has pulled their gun before. This person has pulled their taser before. This person's been in a high stress situation before. This person has had their life on the line before. So let's get the obvious out of the way. The taser weighs 8 ounces. The gun weighs well over 2.2 pounds. The taser's on the left side of the body. The gun's on the right side of the body, depending on their dominant hand. And we have pictures of her in uniform with the taser on the left side and the gun on the right side. We have a body cam video where she says, "I'm going to tase you," and then she pulls the weapon, and then with the weapon in her line of sight says taser, taser, taser before firing. So getting all of the obvious stuff out of the way, and the fact that during a pandemic era where it is noted that things like expired tags and incidents like that have gone dramatically up because it's so much harder to get tags from the DMV. Mail is much slower. The offices are closed sometimes. Some of them are only operating by appointment, and we've seen a dramatic increase across the entire country of people getting their tags expired or license expired, things like that, because it takes a while to get them. And at the Minnesota, the police departments in Minnesota, they have not slowed down on how they enforce that. So there are a lot of obvious situations that kind of bring to bear in this situation. But I want to concentrate on perhaps the most difficult part for us as a community to accept, and it's not widely spoken of. The reason that we are at a second degree manslaughter charge, the manslaughter charge as it differs from a murder charge, is that, in a manslaughter charge, you were reckless and it caused someone's death. Whereas murder charge is you killed someone with the intention of killing someone. The reason that they gave her that charge is because going into this, opening the door at the beginning of this case, we are entering this whole field under the understanding and under the guise that we will believe her story that it was an accident. We are moving forward as the district attorney or whoever it is that laid the charge out. They are operating, starting off, that this was an accident, that we believe her, and that that accident may have come from her being reckless, or that accident may have come from her panicking. But we're starting off with the fact that she was reckless and it was not an intentional thing. And I believe that is incredibly wrong, because again, the point of trials and the point of discovery and evidence and all that is to find out what happened. And you're not going to be able to find out what happened and come to an impartial decision if you are starting in a place where you're operating as if this were an accident and you're trying to figure out a reason why it is. That's no different than any other case where an unarmed black man gets killed and we start looking into their background and we find out we look for a reason for them to be dangerous as opposed to looking for a reason why this person entered a situation, you know, with the intent of taking someone down and treating them like they're dangerous when they have not proven themselves to be. So, looking back at the beginning of this whole thing, we're starting in a bad place. So it's hard to have hope that the situation will be adjudicated properly if you're starting off from a place where, well, we believe this was an accident, unless there's some overwhelming evidence that proves that it isn't. And I would say even the family attorney is a little bit remiss in that regard, because I saw his press conference where he says that, when he talks about the speed of this charge, and he talks about the progress that, you go from, earlier cases where someone wasn't charged at all, and cases where it took a long time for someone to get charged, and then this one was so quick. Well, on one hand, that can be seen as progress, but on the other hand, are you really satisfied with that, with those crumbs from that table? The whole point of what we do with these meetings, what we do with the organization, and what so many others have done, what people do when they organize these protests and when they put these banners together and all these other things, it's because we're tired of accepting the crumbs. We're tired of accepting the little bit that they give us and go, see, we convicted 1 out of 150 of a lesser charge. So, that's progress, right? And everybody goes, well, it was better than what it was, and then that's good enough. No, it isn't. We need, if the goal is equality, then equal justice under the law is what we're looking for. No more, we don't want the 20% less. We don't want well, isn't that progress? Shouldn't we be happy with the progress? Being happy with the little that you get has been something sold to us as a community for far too long. And the whole point of all this is that that's no longer good enough. So that can't be good enough in this case. It can't be good enough whenever we look at these cases and they try to throw out traps like that.
Yes, sir. And on my end, I definitely agree with every point that you made. And I even want to extend on the factor that, for this to be already automatically downgraded, because that's what it is, downgraded to second-degree manslaughter, when there was enough time period in between the pulling of her sidearm and the actual ejection of her sidearm, that she should have recognized, being that much of a vet, and the difference between her weapons, and that's just the biggest issue is, as you said, how much progress are we truly making? If, you threw out the charge quick, but is it the correct charge? That should be where we start. Because normally you only see charges downgraded. It's rare that you will see too many charges upgraded. And even in this factor, I think it will take for the true push of the community for us to have these charges upgraded. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Even with that situation, we're kind of seeing, this is the second time in Minnesota. We're currently still fighting the case in Minnesota in the George Floyd case that we have still not even come to the final conclusion of. And speaking on that case this week, Derek Chauvin is coming to the conclusion of his trial there. And it's just my honest true belief that he can't be guilty. And I only say that because the fact it took multiple officers for that situation to occur. Now, we pray on our end that, there is some type of justice served, and we see him serve some time in jail. But it did take, multiple officers, and the other officers should have been on trial just as long as Chauvin. And so without the accessories involved, you cannot, with it being a police officer, just incriminate totally one officer and not incriminate the rest in a situation of that sort. So I know coming to the end of this trial here, there's going to be a lot of pent up anger and pent up feelings that people are going to have, if the situation does not go how popularity may believe currently. But I think people need to remember with all of these situations, the root issues and how we can get back to attacking those. Mark, kind of with looking over the George Floyd case, and as I said, they stated today that Derek Chauvin is not going to testify in his own trial, but from the evidence that you saw brought forth, how are you feeling currently on that situation?
So we are a symbolic nation, if nothing else. We really like to get behind symbols. We like to put the face on things. We like to put a name to things, and we use those as rallying points and rallying cries for whatever it is that we want, good or bad. In that regard, I think, based on what I've seen to this point, I think that Derek Chauvin may become a bit of a, I don't want to say sacrificial lamb, but he may be the face of, well, maybe we want to convict this one to kind of quell the group. Because as I said in the first segment here, people tend to settle for the crumbs. And so when you look at this situation, Derek Chauvin is the face of this whole issue. He's the one with the knee on the neck. He's the one most visible in the videos. So it's easy to make the trial about him and not about the other officers that held him down, about the situations that would precipitate this, about what would make officers show up, that many even show up to what was essentially a counterfeit $20 bill. I know in the business that I work in, I've had, someone try to pass a counterfeit bill, and I've had to get, the police involved, and one guy showed up and they took the bill, and that was the end of it. So there's a lot to unpack there, but if you can make one person the face of this and give them even a minimal amount of jail time, and they live their lives as the person convicted of this crime, that's enough to pacify a lot of people. There's a lot of people, because they also will look at the other side of that. And we could have a Rodney King situation where if you do a full acquittal, the powder keg that could jump off. And that, they took stock of the cost of last summer. They took stock of the political cost of last summer. They took stock of the physical cost of last summer, and of having that many people angered and motivated out in the streets and all these different things. And you definitely don't want last summer to happen again. So with those things being put into a blender, I kind of feel like he's going to get something. Because if nothing else, you can, it's kind of like the old Roman Coliseum days where you had to throw something in there. You had to throw somebody into the Coliseum. You had to throw something to the mob. And it didn't matter what you took away from them on the back end. You were able to give them a little something on the front, and they can go, well, at least we got justice. At least we got that. And that's enough for some people, So, and just as a side note that I also wanted to pull up, I meant to bring this up in the last segment, and I did not. One thing again, as we're paying attention, as we often do, to some of the things that are not getting the amount of publicity that they probably should, I want to take note of the fact that, the shooting of Deontay Wright happened on Sunday. The protest started immediately on Monday. And by the time we got into the first night of the protest, we had already had such a massive police presence who were able to surround and subdue crowds. We were able to put in curfews. We were able to put in all these other things. And, and again, with the George Floyd protest, we saw the exact same thing, and the type of organization and type of numbers and type of militarization that we talk about that we saw in those, situations. And I juxtaposed that against January 6th. And, I realize, it's an apples and oranges kind of situation, but the meat of the situation is not. The meat of the situation is a crowd of people who feel like an injustice took place, who marched, who got angry, and one was met almost like a matador where they just let them on through. The other was met with military dominant force. So That's another sort of thing that people need to look at as far as how are these things really being applied and how do they apply to us? Is this an equal application of the law? Because it's not, which means this is far bigger than Derek Chauvin. This is far bigger than the officer in the Deontay Wright case. This is far bigger than any one officer. This is a systemic problem. And we need to focus our anger where the anger belongs, which is not on the Minneapolis Police Department. It's not on any other Minnesota, segment of law enforcement. It's policy. It's the political ramifications of the rules that are put in place, the budgets that are put in place, how the money is allocated, where they put it, how they're doing the training, how we apply these things, how a district attorney approaches a case like this, how we approach the evidence, all these different things. We need to look at all of it. We need to look and ask more questions about why was only Derek Chauvin charged. We need to look at things like why wasn't the police department held more to account for the behavior of their officers, and why isn't that an issue that's going on around the country when we see these issues, whether it's North Carolina, whether it's with the Army lieutenant who went through his situation. Like, in each one of these cases, and we could point to all day long, we can see a system of behavior that was okay until it ended up on video. That is the sort of thing that needs to draw our ire and our anger and our political will. And for some reason, it hasn't. It's the individual situations. Because as I said, we're a sensationalized driven country. We go after the symbol. We go after the face. We don't go after the problem.
And I'll say this much when it comes to protesting. We have to realize that last summer was kind of just like it was a dry run. It was the first time a lot of states had seen people come out in these numbers, and a lot of states weren't prepared for these situations. Now, currently, there are laws also around the country being passed state by state on protesting and things of that nature. So we have to realize, and even though there's a whole new administration in office and things of that nature, and people may think that the National Guard coming out was a Trump issue, it's not a Trump issue. That's a government issue, and it's going to still happen if people come out in the same numbers, rioting and things of that nature. Even more so now, you're having more preemptive measures being took city to city, state to state on these issues. So in that sense, people got to realize if, cases don't go as planned, if situations are not handled the way that people want them handled, protesting is not going to be the same that it was last summer. There's going to be a crackdown. You're automatically, as you said, in Minnesota, they had the restrictions put into place before days in, so that people couldn't stay out late and things of that nature with the curfew. Make sure you also, if you feel the need to protest one of these situations, we're not deterring people from protesting or anything of that nature, but make sure you're doing it in the correct manner, and don't become, another situation to occur. Make sure you're worried about your safety and the safety of others that are going along with you on that measure. Kind of speaking on a situation that occurred Monday night in North Carolina, there's a video currently going viral online where two officers kind of roughly arrested a gentleman to the ground. I believe they threw a few punches. It kind of looked more like a street brawl than a tactical arrest. That's kind of, I don't think, with the information that I know of that led up to that situation, I don't think that the arrest was the problem, but the brutality at which the officers used instead of their actual tactical training to arrest that individual, or the actual problem in that case. But that does bring into the question that we have to ask ourselves, which is, how do we want to be policed overall, because that's the biggest question around the country right now. Police still have a job to do. And sometimes they're still going to deal with people who are a little bit more irate than others. At what level of force are we wanting them to use? What type of policies and restrictions are we wanting placed on actual policing? Because from my point of view, of course, with the defund of police and all things of that nature, no, we definitely need policing within our communities, because it's been shown that we cannot completely police ourselves. So we do need a level of policing, but at what level, Mark? Are we asking it at this point?
So I think that, with a situation like this, it's important. It's important to point out that, and keep it real on, the fact that we had a situation where we had a gentleman who may have himself been being difficult. Just from a little bit of information that we had, we had a person who may or may not have seen threatening in the store, being belligerent with staff in the store, um, fleeing from the officers, things like that. But when you see someone take someone down, I mean, at what point does it become okay to start throwing punches? At what point is throwing punches um, a method that should be used to subdue a suspect? Or at that point, a subject. He's not even a suspect yet. He's a subject. So, as it ties into other problems that we see in these things, and I want to make sure that I'm 100% clear about this situation. When I talk about these things, I'm not anti-police. A part of what I'm talking about is helping to keep them safe as well. It's helping to put them in a situation where they are able to do their jobs, because it's a very difficult job. Being asked to police your own population, I don't think people spend enough time thinking about the ramifications of such a thing. And we're definitely not spending enough time screening the right people and training the right people, and knowing that training must be an ongoing thing. The fact that times change, the fact that the climate changes, the fact that how people feel and think, and what they are when it comes to police versus your own safety and getting a handle on a situation so it doesn't get out of hand physically and become more violent than it is at the onset of that encounter. All those things are very, very tough, and there isn't enough conversation about it. A lot of people say that we need reform, we need reform, we need reform. But what we haven't seen is, where are the plans? Where are the ideas? Where are the budgets? Where are where's the bullet points of what needs to happen and what we're seeing versus what we're getting? Those things aren't there. And what if I could do anything, when we talk about these things, it is to kind of wake people up to the fact that there's a lot of vested interest in this not changing, in this system not changing at all, because it's an adversarial system. It keeps us worried about something over here. It keeps, even the police unions, they have to stake their own territory. They have to defend their own ground. We have all of these different things, and we're not concentrating on the right thing, which is, this is a systemic problem. Systemic problems mean the system, every piece of it, from the basement to the roof, is a problem. And we're concentrating on symptoms of the disease instead of treating the disease. We're not treating the policy. And for officers as well, this is a policy problem, because you're being put in a situation where you are being trained to go out there and dominate a situation, because you got to deal with every homeless issue. You have to deal with every mental health issue. You have to deal with somebody stealing $20. You have to deal with an expired tag. You have to deal with all these different things. And you walk into them and you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know if there's a mental health problem. You don't know if there's, a situation where just seeing you in that badge and that gun is going to invoke so much terror in a person that they may act irrationally where they normally wouldn't. All of these different things. So this is about them too. And the fact that we need to have the type of policies that will be in place that actually are meant to help keep peace, There's a lot about getting on top of things, law and order, law and order, law and order, and there's so many people who are so bent on that, and they think no deeper than that. It's like, that's great. How do you apply law and order? How should we apply law and order to our citizenry and keep the citizenry? It isn't about keeping them in line, but it's about making sure that they're able to be safe, that the officers are able to be safe, that people are able to trust that that system will keep them safe and is in their best interest. And if and that way, if we have somebody go rogue on it, if we have somebody not follow it, it's easy to identify. We have systems in place that will give equal justice under the law. But say it again, that will be able to take a bad person if a mistake was made and a bad person is on the street, get them off. This is not just for our safety, it's not just for our equality, it's for their safety and their equality as well. So all these things need to be dealt with from the bottom to the top in order to keep situations like this from happening. Because, hey, thankfully, nobody lost their life in this situation. Too many of these situations end the wrong way. But how many times are we going to go through this rinse and repeat pattern of, police in this situation, black men in this situation, armed or unarmed? It usually ends in death. And then there's the issue, and then now there's the protest, and then a couple of people in the protest, break some glasses or set some fires. Now that becomes the issue instead of the other issue. Like, how many times are we comfortable with this rinse and repeat cycle? When do we take a step back, take a 30,000-foot view of the situation, and go, wait a minute, this is a serious problem, and the problem doesn't start here with the incident. The problem goes back over to here with the policy. And let's get at that, and let's get it on the table. There's a reason why we've had so many protests, so many issues over all these times. I mean, you think about what happened with Trayvon Martin, and you think about the time between Trayvon Martin and today. Think about the distance, the protests, the issues between Trayvon Martin and Deontay Wright, and how much policy has been implemented in that time. There's been a lot of protests. There's even been a few cops that went to jail. There's been a lot of things. There's been a lot of issues, a lot of anger, a lot of TV spots, a lot of interviews. How much policy? These are the sort of things that we need to be talking about. And these are the sort of things that, while marching and while protesting is important, it is holding this part accountable. That is the difference between this continuing and this changing.
I totally agree. And as we kind of stated a while back, I know me and you had a conversation discussing kind of the energy being brought towards the movement from different people. I kind of put up a post this week speaking on it, how when it takes for a situation to happen, we kind of went all the way from, I believe it was September when the protests really, calmed down last year, all the way up until April of this year, when it took for someone else to lose their life at the hands of a police officer for people to feel the need to get up and protest inequality and injustice again, instead of it being a constant push on the inequality that has created this entire systemic injustice. Because, as me and you kind of stated before we started this segment today, this situation doesn't occur from a sense of policing. It kind of starts from, a person being having an unequal opportunity, being in a worse environment. Even George Floyd, a person being around a drug problem or a drug situation. These are the issues that we need to be attacking as a community when we're talking about injustice. And these are things that we need to be protesting instead of it always taking for the loss of a life for us to feel the need to protest. Kind of on that end, Mark, how do what's your take on that?
My take on that is that every time these situations come up and there's giant protests and people have the signs out and the banners out and they're clashing with police in front of the police station, but somewhere there's some lawmakers sitting in a smoky room around a wooden table laughing. And the reason why I say that is because, again, we're concentrating on the wrong thing. When we look at the way that these policies are built up, and I just spoke on the fact that we haven't seen much in the way of policy change. What we're not, what a lot of people are not understanding is that when we're railing against the police, what we need to be railing against is the situations and the circumstances that made the situation possible in the first place. We need to be looking at how things are allocated, how things are set up, the amount of opportunities that we're getting in the neighborhoods, the amount of jobs that are moving into the neighborhoods versus moving out of the neighborhoods, the amount of education dollars that are going into places that have more children than places that have fewer children. All the different things they're all pieces of it. They sound different because, again, there's a sensationalization to officer shot man in a traffic stop, and it sounds that, and it sounds like, okay, well, that's the problem. No, the system is the problem. And as you back up from that situation and begin to see some of the things the connective tissue of how the police are policing, where, there's a drug problem in the inner city. Why is there a drug problem in the inner city? How are they fighting drugs in this area versus how they're fighting them in that area? Or, when black people in a neighborhood, get hooked on drugs and they act out and they do something crazy because they're hooked on drugs, that person ends up either dead or they end up in prison, versus in a suburb area where somebody gets fried out on drugs and they do something crazy and they end up in a rehab facility. Why is that way instead of the other way? And we all know the answer is money, but who allocates that money? These are the sort of things that aren't being talked about. Education, again, there should be more money and more resources going into a place where there are simply more people, because you have more people to educate, you have more people to, make sure that they don't fall through the net, as opposed to a place with a lower population. Again, it comes down to money, and some of it's privatized and some of it's public. But how these things are allocated, a transparency of that allocation, those are the keys to taking away the circumstances that make these things possible. There should be more incentive to police living in the areas that they will patrol. They're not a part of those neighborhoods. They come from miles and miles away. They don't know anybody there. They're only there to enforce. They're only there to enforce. And that puts a situation where they come up on a situation. They don't know any of these people. They don't know the neighborhood. They don't know where they are. So the whole thing is, I got to dominate the situation. I have to be in control of the situation because something can happen to me if I'm not. And again, we're lighting a powder keg, because now we have a situation where I need to get a hold of the situation, where we also versus the person who's on the receiving end of that, who is, justifiably so, programmed to either be angered or fearful of the person standing in front of them in that situation. So this is a mushroom cloud of issues that goes so far backwards. And if we don't spend enough time and effort dealing with this situation, we're losing the fight, because there's a very intricate game being played now. And I'll actually throw a little piece of the game out there right now. There are several states, state of Tennessee being one of them, that is putting in legislation on the state level that if you get busted in a protest, after a protest has been declared a riot, which they declare that at the drop of a hat, that you could lose your right to vote in the next election. There are so many people that don't even know that. And this is just, again, if you can't win an election, take away the voters. That's a good way to take away the voters. Now, why do you think a protest about police brutality could end with someone not able to vote in the next election? What do you think would be the game? What do you think would be the purpose behind such a policy? And it's to keep you from being able to express that anger in the manner in which it should be expressed, which is a registration and one man, one woman, one vote. That's how we truly display our anger and our displeasure with the system and our desire to change it would be electing those people out who created it and maintain it, and putting people in with a mandate to change it. So, as we do these things, and this is the perfect time to have these type of issues, to have these type of trials, because you know why? Because we are a full year and a half away from having to worry about everybody getting out there and voting again. Sure, you got a couple of primaries. Sure, you got a couple of special elections between now and then, but we got a long time. We got a long time for us to, go out there, shape narratives with the media, have a couple more incidents, have this Derek Chauvin trial end one way or the other, and have everybody's mind kind of go in the opposite direction, worrying about symptoms, while the problem still sits over here, making sure that they're continuing to twist the screws and continuing to change the game and the rules of the game to make sure that you are incapable of winning it. That's the way that this has been done for a very, very long time. And we have the ability now to actually know it to the point where, two guys can jump on a video cam and speak on it. So we have the ability to deal with it if we're willing. And we just got to be able to put some action behind this will.
I'm definitely on board with you on that end. And as I said, we got to continue attacking the root of these issues. And you made a valid point with we're years off from the next primary election or general election to where we can actually make the same huge changes that we made last year. But along the path, we have to make sure that we're keeping an eye on these local elections and state elections. As you said, with the situation going on in Tennessee right now, figure out which representatives are actually voting which way. And let's go ahead and which ones we can get out of office come midterm next year. Let's get them out, and then we'll weed out the rest when we get our general election coming around again. And that has to be the train of thought of people in these communities and in these areas, instead of, we're just going to, continue to show face and make noise. No, we have to actually start making moves to make these changes actually occur in the bigger sense. Mark, closing out today, if there was before I do a couple of announcements on my end, if there's any other point you kind of wanted to touch on with any of these issues.
I want to talk just for a second about energy. We want to make sure, and again, we speak on these things. I know you posted on the group page about this, and I want to make sure, to kind of put my own name and my own voice to this for a second, is that I just spoke about people have a bet against you right now. There's people out there that bet you can't keep this energy up. There's people out there that bet that you can go out there and you'll get mad, you'll say some things, and you'll protest a little bit, and you'll get a little bit of anger, you'll make a little bit of noise or whatever, but you won't vote them out. You won't deal with some of the issues and some of the things that they put in states like Georgia. You won't stand in line that long. You won't stand there. You won't go to the one drop box. You won't fill out the paperwork properly. They're betting against you. They're betting against your energy. They're betting against your drive to actually want something better. And, as we talk about many times before, we do a lot of different types of ways to outreach, to connect people, to kind of get that energy going and to keep that energy up. And for some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. But there needs to be far more dialogue and discussion about how to change the world than we get on a TikTok video about a girl falling down dancing. It's just that simple, because the girl falling down dancing is entertainment, and we need entertainment, especially the way the world is now. I'm not knocking the hustle, but what I am knocking is the fact that we've got to be able to donate and contribute at least that amount of energy to some of the things that we're talking about. We post these things, for example, you put out things on the Minority Monday, and you could make money, and you are making money, and that could just be your secret. You're the one who went out and learned what you needed to learn and did what you needed to do so that you can do that. But if you chose to give that and loan that expertise and what you've learned and give that time and effort, that means something. And people need to get to kind of take in that energy. And I'm not saying you need to run out and get yourself an account tomorrow or any of those other things. But what I'm saying is we need to be able to pay that sort of thing, the type of attention that we pay some of the things that are given, that are put in our way as a speed bump, as a distraction towards getting us what we need. We need economic freedom. We need uh, political equality, and we need, equality across the board when it comes to education, police reform, justice, everything across the board. And it's going to require a lot of our energy. It's going to take a lot of time to put this system together. It's going to take a lot of time to tear it down. And we need to be able to put our energy where it is, and we need to be able to channel that anger into action that works. We know what action does not. All right, throwing bottles at police doesn't change anything. Marches don't really change anything, whether it be from the Women's March in early 2017, March for Our Lives in 2019, the Black Lives Matter marches, the marches that we had all over the country. Oh, a lot of marches. Would you like to go back to the statistics about policy? Because they're not there. So we got to put our energy where it needs to be. We did that in 2020, thankfully, and there's more to do. So we just got to put our energy where it belongs so that we can help each other get what we're trying to get. Nobody's trying to make a buck off this. We're just trying to get better.
And I mean, that's the absolute truth. And I want people to know, even with this organization, anything we do to generate any funds through this organization all go back into this organization. I kind of put up the post this week, on the reason why we started a nonprofit. A nonprofit is just that. It's a nonprofit. There are a million other ways. Mark has a way of income. I have a way of income. I don't need, anything from the organization. I know there was an article a while back on Black Lives Matter, the owner or the founder of Black Lives Matter, and her going and spending, donated funds on personal things and stuff of that such. And I mean, that's even, more so why we started the organization was because we saw certain flaws of that such coming along with an organization that got too big too quick in Black Lives Matter, where there was not people watching how the money was being spent along the lines and things of that nature. Anything we do towards this organization, everything goes 100% back into this organization and that factor. Kind of going a little further with our YouTube, I know it's more people who, kind of see our clips and our shorts that we have up. Don't be afraid to subscribe on that end. Join us on Facebook. Of course, we still have the What's Your Journey contest going on where you can win a Ancestry DNA kit. All you got to do is come on and, speak a little bit on what brought you to the movement, what pushes you out to protest, why does this matter to you is basically all we're asking. And, you actually have a opportunity to win something through the organization. Kind of with the audience members and the people that are listening on that end, we would love to bring you in a little bit more into the Facebook page so that you guys also have an opportunity at, winning one of these Ancestry DNA kits also, because we're really huge on especially minorities within America doing their DNA test and, figuring out their actual origin and where you actually come from, because down the lineage, we actually have, all been mixed in, due to slaves coming over way back in the 1800s and intermingling. You may be, Nigerian, Ethiopian, you may come from different parts of Africa. And it's always a good thing to be actually able to get in touch with your true nationality and things of that sort. So we are still huge on that. And we would love to, have the opportunity to give away those 2 kits to 2 individuals. So definitely come and take a look at what we're doing on that end. And again, with our Monday segments, go on our YouTube page and be able to scroll through a couple of our segments overall. We've put together, I believe, Mark, at this point, 45 different segments that we've done since last year, and they all have great information in them. We're always pushing for people to actually go and, just listen, even if you can only loan 5 or, 10 minutes of your time to, kind of overview of these different situations and how we can attack them. It only takes for each of us to come into the conversation and, apply a little bit for there to actually be true change occurring. So on that end, that's our only goal and our only hopes with doing any of this.
Absolutely. I mean, we set out, as a place of being able to, display some of our anger and disgust at, a situation in a nation that wasn't built for us, and how we could change that, and how we could use our combined power. There's so much talent and energy and strength in the minority community, and if we can focus that like a laser, we can cut through any mountain. And there are people out there who know that, and so there are people out there who will do anything to stop that. So we're going to continue doing what we're doing because we're not letting that happen. And we always say the same thing to everybody out there. This is for all of us to become stronger, and that we are going to take care of ourselves. We're going to take care of each other because no one else will. And we're going to do what we continue to do here with organizations to continue to shine that light and continue to, give people their opportunities. I know I say it to Colin all the time. We don't know which snowball you throw at the side of the mountain is going to cause that avalanche. But sooner or later, that avalanche is going to come, and we're all going to be better off for it. So that's all I can say for this week is, continue to take care of each other. Continue to look out for one another, and let's get after it and be safe out there.